Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Stouse. Welcome to Accelerating Value. This is a podcast that is totally dedicated to what it takes to create value, to invest in it, to protect it, to accelerate it, to prove that it exists, is what I mean there. So we do this weekly. We have a lot of great guests. I really encourage you to tune in. This week is no exception. We have Joe Tran, who is probably one of the most value-oriented marketing strategists that I've met in my career. And he does a lot with RevOps. He works more broadly as well. And we're just going to have a conversation for about the next 20 or 25 minutes about how he sees value, how he sees value, where it's going, and the understanding of value, how that's kind of changing and morphing and within the marketing profession, and specifically how he's working with clients to kind of grapple with a lot of change and a lot of volatility in the marketplace. So, Joe, really awesome to have you, man. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast.
Sure, you bet. So let's start with how things have changed when you work with clients before COVID and after COVID, when it comes to the pressure that they're under to create value and how they're going about developing strategies to create that value. Do you see a contrast?
Well, in general, I think what's happening more is, like everything else that we see in the marketplace, everything is shifting more online because of necessity. And this can be anything that, from your local mom and pop to, a lot of, Fortune 500. If they don't have enough presence, they're trying to expand more. And from that, they're trying to figure out what's the profitability, or what's really working. So, the value is, where can we invest our money, and is it more successful within that ecosystem? So, yeah, basically is be more presence online and everywhere. So.
And how are they thinking about, other than channels and venues and things like that, how are they thinking about all the variables that they don't control at all, and the impact on value that those have? So it could be COVID and all the things that COVID caused. It could be an economic situation. It could be their competitors and what their competitors are up to. How do you see all this kind of evolving, not just in terms of tactical choices, but in terms of the way that the marketers are thinking about all this?
Well, everything still comes down to performance and results, and different KPIs, for example, right? This whole ecosystem, pre-COVID and after COVID, is forcing people to really understand the user on the individual side, not just more broadly. So you have to understand what's the needs of the individual before you even talk to them. And once you start engaging with them, you want to know, where are they in the pipeline and what stage they are. So given that, just being more awareness, not just as a marketer, but overall as an organization, to the needs of the individual or the organizations.
And tell me how you're advising your customers to do that. So you're really talking about an ICP, an ideal customer profile, right?
Yep.
What does that look like? Because I think that is kind of an underappreciated aspect of marketing and sales that a lot of times in different companies, particularly in startups, tends to get short shrift. So when you're sitting down talking about that with a marketing team or even a sales team or both, right? What's that like these days?
Oh, well, it's really defining who your target market is, and say that very broadly. And so to be specific, say, it comes back to the 80-20 rule. Especially during COVID, you really don't want to be all things to all people. You want to be able to understand who you can benefit the most and go after that and improve within that. Now, your audience, if you're looking at different channels, you hear, things like TikTok and this within the social media platform. Well, I should be here, I should be there, I should be here and there. But in reality, you should be where your customers are. And it's not just following the fad and where you think it is or where the fad is going, but really where your customer is and the information how they're gathering to solve their particular problem or what problem they have and try to solve that. So you can listen within the marketplace. There's different tools you can do for social listening to understand what's going on. You can obviously create content to make sure your message and your solutions can fulfill that objective. You can look at doing a little bit more of a deep search within the customer behaviors and user intent, and you can do that using data that you probably didn't even know exists, which is Google and Facebook. They have in-market data. So say, for instance, if you're selling a vehicle, a certain type of vehicle, you're selling a Jeep, and that data is present within Facebook and within Google up to a point. Now, the new privacy rules and laws and changes is happening. So some of that data may be gone. But in general, you want to make sure your messages is hitting the right target audience within the right framework at the right time.
How do you feel like that your customers these days are thinking about risk, right? And particularly, like, how are they helping their customers address their risks, but also risk on marketing spend, right? So there's ROI, right, on marketing spend, and there's also the risk of not getting that return, right? That people are kind of wrestling with right now, given the volatility in the market. How are you kind of seeing them deal with that?
I think that's such a wonderful question right there as far as risk. So it's risk of not doing something and risk of missing the opportunity, right? Most of the time people think about risk as, hey, I'm going to spend this money and I'm not going to get anything back. But a lot of people don't think about the risk of opportunity. But this really is an easy way to solve those problems, is jump in there fast and jump in there with a defined KPI. That's not too granular, not too big, but just small enough where you can do a pilot and test and then build upon that success and then continue the momentum. And it depends on different, marketing company or different organizations on what that may be and what the KPI may be and what they're willing to do. But essentially, define your KPI, what you want to establish or what you want to hit, what you can define as a win, and try to do that with a small spend, and then accelerate from that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. How do you when you're talking with a client, one of the things that people really care a lot about today is time to value, right? And the faster the time to value, they see that as also mitigating the risk of a bad decision, right? They're kind of looking for the lines to cross sooner rather than later. Do you feel like that when you develop strategies for your customers, that's something that you're being, I'm sure it's always been a part of your planning, but is it a bigger part? Is it the same as before? How are people thinking about that?
To me, it's always been adding more things to the value. to gain that success. So in every campaign, I want to say every industry, and there's some commonalities, right? So the first is, how do you get that visibility? The second is, once you get the visibility, how does that come into the pipeline? How can you improve the process within the pipeline? So with all of that, you want to make sure that you have things in place for us. We're leveraging multi-channel attributions, multi-channel as well as contacts. So we know where they are in the pipeline. We know where they, what their needs is. We know at what the stage they are, so we can communicate to them more efficiently. And by doing that, you're not wasting money on things that they don't want, and you're not wasting time on the client side or on your side on things that's not necessary. So what you can be really laser focused, not just in attracting the client, but also laser focused once they come into the pipeline too.
So one of the things that we're talking about a lot here is what a lot of marketers would call performance marketing, right?
Yep.
How do you think about brand marketing these days, right? I mean, particularly again, kind of the contrast before COVID, after COVID, during COVID, right? How do you see that today?
Well, brand is definitely the distinguisher, right? You can always have, performance marketing. What am I getting for my money? That's always somebody, that's the key is I'm giving you X amount of dollars. What am I getting the results on that? And that can happen, whether you're a decision maker, a marketing director, or all the way to the CEO. The CEO asks the marketing, CMO, hey, I'm giving you this kind of money. What am I getting? So the brand aspect ecosystem should be carried across throughout the whole organization, because the value, ironically, my company is named Brandigy, and it's whatever each step the perceived value is. So it doesn't matter if they see you on TV, a newspaper, radio, but it's also with every touch point, right? So for instance, Pizza Hut, just a cook at Pizza Hut do something stupid and post it on Facebook, or it looks bad for the whole organization. A CEO makes a bad comment, it's bad for the brand, for the whole organization, and they have to be out immediately. So as far as the brand, it's more about, it's not just the brand what you see, but it's also about the culture. So the culture should be there, so that the people will like you. Basically, people will want to do business with people you like and trust, and that's the same thing with brand.
Do you one of the things that's been written about quite a bit, and you saw this a lot in say 2019 in particular, where there were a lot of marketers who started to say, wow, you know what, we're touching people so much proactively, right? Meaning direct marketing, so-called performance marketing, that it's actually creating negative brand for us, right? We're sort of irritating our prospects and customers because we're touching them so much. When you're sitting with one of your clients, how do you counsel them to kind of think about that, right? Is there kind of a rule of thumb that you have about the limits of performance marketing?
Well, it goes down to the objectives, well, what you want to do. Like if it's just, say for instance, you're running a Super Bowl ad, you probably going to see that ad once, 2, 3 times. That's it. But you're spending $10 million on that ad, plus all the creatives and whatever that's necessary, right? Or you can just do a 15 to a second to a minute video, and you see it in YouTube all the time. So it's a matter of whether the consumer likes that or not. They have the opportunity to opt out. But ironically, as far as multi-channel, multiple way where the consumer can digest how many touch points that is. The not the market is dictating in this particular case, but the companies are dictating the privacy issues and how much visibility any given advertiser or organization is going to be displayed. For example, Apple iOS 14.5 and believe it or not, Google is also taking away some of the pixels and cookies. So the trackability to know where people are on the state, where they are in the pipeline, and say I look something on the mobile phone, then I can see something on my browser on my computer. That is going away pretty soon. So the market itself is going to dictate that. Well, not the organization, the high tech companies are going to dictate that. And there's a mini war happening between different companies, say Facebook, Apple, and Google. There's a lot of tension within that, and saying who's right and who's wrong, and what should be private, who should see much, and how much data should be known, and how much you should know about an organization or a company.
What do you see? Are you seeing any impact yet from 14.5?
Absolutely. I'm seeing, as far as trackability, what's going to happen. I'm seeing impact on the campaign wide. I'm not seeing as much per se volume per se, but we've been planning on this, so we're structuring it so you can see more quality. So some of the direct click and buys me now stuff, or the retargeting, seeing something once and that's it. That ecosystem is going to be hurt a lot. On the e-commerce, understand the attributions and where the conversion is on that is going to be hurt on that. So you should have your data in place. You should have your, if you're a big enough organization, you should have your data lake in place, and so that you won't be hurt as much. But definitely, this is just the very beginning of a very difficult time for marketers, and especially online.
When you think about alternatives to that data that's going away, what are you kind of thinking about? Like, where do you want to take your clients on this issue?
Ironically, you have to go more high tech, and you have to be able to understand who comes to your website and who's your audience is on your own site. You can't depend on the Facebook. You can't depend on Google for that initial discussion that we have for in-market data and such like that. So if you have to basically have the content, get the search that comes into your website if you're online, get the search to come to your site, advertise within that, have tools, whether you're B2B or B2C, be able to have your own first-party data to understand who your audience is, and be able to market that correctly, whether you can take that hash data and push it out to create your own audience into all these different platforms or not. But definitely that if you don't have that in place, you will see serious decline in your marketing potentials.
I really agree with that. Are you seeing anything happening with LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is, I haven't seen it that, I don't advertise so much in LinkedIn. I advertise within Google, YouTube, and Facebook. I haven't seen that, but we literally plot out business process for our B2B clients to push data and feed data from one platform to another. So literally, if you want to think of it as plumbing, we created plumbing so that it's, even though it's invisible, it's connecting from one data set to another data set, so that we can target the right individual at the right time based on the data set.
And you feel like you're able to you will be able to continue to do that as effectively in both B2B and B2C as you have been in the past, bridging out of the data sets that we historically have had access to into whatever's coming?
Yes, you just have to be able to have access to, so that you are with a provider that have first party data and that you own, you can own that data. So you do data matching, you do data attributions on that. So
Excellent.
yeah.
So kind of a challenging period for marketers, but both the pressure to create value and the opportunity to create value, you see it as being just as significant as it always was.
I think so. I think it's once you get that hurdle of change, what you need to do, what the initial investment, because this nothing is going to be. It goes back to a question: what should I invest? Am I going to get the return and value? And also that question of how much we should test, right? Just have your goals in place and try and set up those things and see what kind of value you can set from that. For instance, get the initial tools that can get you the first party data and push that into the system where your customers are and see if you can get that visibility back again if you're starting to lose visibility or that in-market data from the Google or from the Facebook or even LinkedIn, because LinkedIn you're going to see a decline. But on the other side, if your customer base is within those ecosystem already, for instance, if you're looking for marketing, marketing directly to a marketing director per se for SaaS software, you still can market within that. You just going to lose some tracking capability of, hey, when they went to your page, did they convert? Some of that may be gone, but you can track that in your form to see, hey, that data, they did fill out that form, it came from this. And if you have your attribution, if you have your first party data, then you can match that internally within your site, within your organization, within your data pool. So you know what's working and how you're making money or not.
Joe, thanks so much. This has been a great conversation. I think a lot of people will have gotten a lot from this because we got into some pretty strong detail. I think that the shifts that you're talking about with data are going to be really, really interesting to follow. I think, in addition to what you were saying, what I see is that people are gradually becoming aware of the fact that they're going to have to come out of PII, right?
Yes.
Or more out of it, right? Have less of it, and they'll have more aggregate data, and that aggregate data has its strengths as well, right? And so it's going to be really, really interesting, I think, for the next.
It will be.
Years.
Yeah, it's going to be, and it comes down to business model. I think, different social platforms, they're free platforms. So are they going to start charging people to attend the revenue and not depend on just the app platform? Is there going to be opt-in and new clause and stuff like that? So it will be interesting.
I do want to ask you one more question. How are you seeing the future on this whole topic? So, and what I really mean by that is, do you see the tightening of data availability continuing to get more challenging for a while beyond 14.5 or whatever Google's doing? Or do you feel like that we've kind of also hit a plateau here where everybody can kind of catch their breath and get used to a new situation before there's more change?
Yeah, I try to follow the leaders within the space, and IAB is one of the leaders. I just recently read an article on that, and they're saying it's going to be very much more difficult. Right now, There's going to be state laws in place. You see that in California. There's going to be other states. You see that with the Europe. You
Yep.
see that with Europe, but
Yep.
then you may see that nationally, what happens in the U.S. So you have to be, really careful on the data. And even if you have the data, then you have to make sure your data is protected and you don't, you're not liable to your data being leaked on that. So there's a lot of privacy issues on top of
Yeah.
the power that you have. You also have the power. You need to have the protections in place on that too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate it. Guys, I know that you got a lot out of this. There's a pretty rich vein of gold in this conversation, particularly around the availability of data and the changes that are coming. If you have any questions on this, you'll be able to post them underneath the podcast, and I know that Joe would love to answer them. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.